Giles Brown.
Let's talk.
You're listening to Giles Brown on TRE Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain. Forbidden is a new book by Jordan Rosenblum. He's a Belzer Professor of Classical Judaism and Director of the Moshe Weinstein Center for Jewish Studies in the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's written a book, and when this first landed on my desk as press notes, I sort of did a double take, because I've done interviews, as you know, listeners. I am a history buff. I have done all sorts of interviews, everything from Plantagenets through to Second World War, but I've never had to do an interview with a subject with such a particular look at the world. Delighted to say that I'm joined by Jordan. Now, Jordan, good afternoon from us. Good morning to you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's exciting. This book, it's funny you say that, this is the book that I've both wanted to and avoided writing for the longest time, because the pig kept popping up, and I kept collecting notes about it, and I would give talks that involved, and I'm someone who focused on the ancient world, but there were things I'd find in medieval or early modern or modern, and it kept coming up all over the place. So now, even after I finally put the pig book to bed and sent it off to my publisher, I continue to find it everywhere. Recently, we were talking about this before off air, but I will give this away. I'm a amateur musician, and I was reading the autobiography of Geddy Lee, the bass player and singer from Rush, and he's talking about a time of his childhood where he snuck off and observed his dad, a Holocaust survivor, secretly eating eggs and bacon, and what he took that to mean. And what I found is Jews and non-Jews for thousands of years have looked at the pig and used it to talk about Jewish and non-Jewish identity. So it's both a small and a impossibly large subject.
So when you look, because obviously forbidden refers to the pig, and yes. So what is the strict? Because you are the man who knows, and I am, I'm just a Church of England guy. So what is the beef with pork, if you'll pardon the expression?
Oh, I love it. So what is so this is where I start off. All you had was the Bible. The pig is prohibited, but so is the eagle, the rock badger, the camel. If all you had was the Bible, you wouldn't understand why. Well, you wouldn't understand much about the band Rush anyway, but you wouldn't understand why it's a big deal that he saw his dad eating pig. You'd say, yeah, you shouldn't eat it, just like you shouldn't eat a fish that doesn't have fins and scales. But what happens is, a few centuries later, starting identifying the Second Temple period, Jews and non-Jews start talking about the pig as it meaning something more. And then each subsequent generation says it means more. And the pig gets bigger. It gets fatter. It means more. It's laden with more meaning. And so what happens is now you have over 2,000 years of tradition where suddenly the pig means so much more. And so what this book is the story of how that comes to be and why now the pig stands alone. The pig means so much more. So the origin is, we don't exactly know why. The Bible says, God says don't eat it, but God says don't eat lots of things. Because you should be holy. But why that makes you holy, I don't know. People have lots of theories, can't prove or disprove any of them. Well, I feel you can disprove several. But what you then start to get is generations of people adding meaning to it and explicitly telling you why they think it is. And then you also have people who, like Jews, who choose to eat pig to mark them violating Jewish law, which is funny because they're transgressing Jewish law, but yet continuously pointing back to how Jewish they are, right? Like, look how not Jewish I am. On Yom Kippur, in the Day of Atonement, when I should be fasting, I'm eating pig. Like, but you're choosing to mark that day to point, or at one point I point out there were, in the 1920s and 30s, there were Jewish communists in USSR who were trying to show how they'd thrown off the opiate to the masses. So they say, look, we're going to raise pigs on collective communist farms. Look, we've given up religion. But again, they're trying to show, look, we're Jewish, but we're not Jewish. We're communists, so we're going to raise pigs because we're Jews who shouldn't be doing that, which is kind of ironic because it keeps pointing back to the fact that they're Jewish.
And the thing is, you were a professor of ancient history. The ancients, I mean, back in the day, and I mean really back in the day, everything was precious. Livestock was precious. You had to, you were perhaps nomadic, or obviously with pigs, maybe it's more so you've got settlements. So you're in the middle of kind of, I know it's a fertile land wherever you're in Mesopotamia or whatever, but you know, it's not the case you can just nip out and get more. So you would think that they would go, look, if you need to survive, you need to eat this. I can get the thing about fish without fins or whatever, and sea, and you know, whatever's crawling around on the floor of the sea, and to a certain extent, you know, camels, the honey badger deserves it anyway. So why? I mean, is it because pigs are kind of everywhere, and this is why it kind of marks it out that certain faiths cannot eat our little porcine friends?
Well, the one thing I often teach my students is every recorded culture throughout time and space, there's two things about them. I mean, there's more than two things, but for my classes, I want them to understand two. One is they ate, right? Because if your culture doesn't eat, it's not going to last that long. And two, they do not eat things that are ingestible. So that could be, today there could be roadkill, right? It could be dogs, it could be cats. They're edible. It could be bugs. There are TV shows, at least in America, like reality shows where it would consist of basically trying to force people to eat bugs, which are low in protein, high in protein, low in fat. The Hebrew Bible spends a lot more time telling you what bugs are edible, right? Plenty of them are biblically kosher, and people are afraid to eat them, but they're edible. So it seems to be a human desire to kind of put meaning by saying we are the people who eat X, but we don't eat Y, even though it's available. And what I will say is that I do firmly believe that pig also grew as an important marker because it was the most obviously non-kosher meat around. So like when Rome was in charge, Rome loved the pig and it was everywhere. And so, Jews would eat cow, goat, sheep. So that doesn't mark, but pig was a common meat. And so as it became more important in Rome, it was in ancient Roman and Greek texts, the three things they notice about Jews most are they celebrate the Sabbath, their men are circumcised, and they don't eat pig. And so I think that also becomes, the more people say, hey, that's weird that you don't eat that, then it also became a Jewish marker to say, hey, well, it's weird that you do eat it. And so it gets invested with more and more meaning.
You see, you learn something new every day, and obviously doing the interviews I do. So I've just had this sudden thought, the pig as an instrument, as a cipher of Roman occupation and oppression.
Yes. Well, so when the Second Temple in 70 CE was destroyed by Rome, and Judaism at the time was a temple-based religion, the legion, the Legio Ex Potenza, Legio 10 Fretenza, the 10th Legion, their animal, like everyone has like their symbol was the boar, which gets read in by Jewish sources as very meaningful. The pig destroyed the temple. And so, the pig then becomes a symbolic of Rome, with a capital T, the pig. And then that continues to grow in time. That becomes then, when the Roman Empire gets Christianized and things, then all those symbols get read onto Christianity as embodying the pig. And Christians start talking about the idea of the pig as a good Christian eats that. Bad, they'll talk about Judaizers, which they really mean bad Christians then. They end up talking about bad Christians are like Jews. So the better Christian you are, the more pig you eat. And so to bring it home to Spain, for example, one of the ideas becomes during Inquisition, one of the ways to show that you're truly Christian is to display pig. And so even today, right, you can go to butcher shops, there are pigs everywhere. And many theorize that one of the reasons that becomes a cultural marker is it's a way of easily displaying, sometimes falsely, look, I'm not Jewish. Look, I'm not a converso who's secretly hiding behind the scenes. And this is an important point to make. One of the terms used derogatorily against Jews who converted forcibly or otherwise to Christianity during the Inquisition, right, were Marranos. Marrano means pig. And there's an irony there, but it was a way of saying, are they really pigs? And pigs also look kosher on the outside, right? They have split hooves, but they don't chew the cud. And so it became Jews and Christians used as a metaphor for hypocrisy, looking kosher, but secretly being corrupt. And so it became a metaphor and a mockery, but call the pigs.
And I suppose the other thing is because the Roman Empire splits, they've got the Vandals, the Goths, etc., in the final fall, and then it splits and it becomes, you have the Holy Roman Empire, which turns into the Byzantine Empire and the whole thing, which then becomes the Catholic Church. Good morning to you. And there is no better way than of showing what a good Catholic you are than the pig. And also, you are absolutely. And I hadn't thought of this before because I'm based in Andalusia, which was part of Al-Andalus, which is part of the Caliphate of Cordoba, the only caliphate outside Damascus. And I mean, this is a vegetarian's nightmare here. You walk into any bar or any supermarket, and on an occasion you will see half a full leg of pig sort of sitting there, cured, and the whole thing.
And Al-Andalus didn't used to be like that. So Maimonides, writing in the 12th century, was living in Al-Andalus, Muslims area, and he talks about how there are no pigs here. And he says, he talks about the land of the Franks, which he's talking about Germany, he's talking about these other regions that are, he said, their places are like latrines because there are pigs everywhere. Right? He talks about like the pigs make it dirty, right? And then you have with those who are in charge of the region coming along with pigs, too suddenly pigs are in the region, right? But he imagines the region as pig-free. But part of the displaying of the pig was displaying of Christian identity. And that was one of the points I bring up in my medieval chapter is that's also a story not just about Jews, it's about Christians debating about who is a good Christian and using the pig to show. There's a poem from 18th century Burgundy, France, that talks about the more pig you eat, the better Christian you become, right? To show, because you're displaying that. Or one of the biggest during the Inquisition, one of the biggest charges brought against people, and people were tortured and killed because of this, were claims that they avoided eating pig. And there were some who said, look, I eat tons of other non-kosher food. I just don't like the pig. It's not that I care about my Judaism. It's that I don't like pig. But look at all these other non-kosher foods I eat. Or Voltaire and Candide has a story of someone who fell foul of the Inquisition because they saw them taking out bacon from their chicken sandwich.
Right.
No, they just don't like it, right? And these are all the stories that I find. I mean, look, there's real violence behind that, so we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But the way that pig is being used to discuss identity over thousands of years, as a historian, is fascinating to watch how it changes and develops and morphs over time. And so it's following the pig as it kind of sticks its snout in everywhere.
Yeah, and the thing is, because 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, etc., and it's we call it the Reconquest. I have my own theory about that because those rather dull and severe rulers, Ferdinand and Isabella, take over, liberate, from because the Andalus is split into all sorts of different things. Bobadil, of course, leaves Granada with the big sigh and all that. But if you are a nervous ruler and you're not, because again, the Jews are still in Spain. They're a very important part of Spain. Lucena, the capital, of course, just behind Cordoba. You still have those Muslims who have converted and become ostensibly Christian, but they're still practicing. They're still praising Allah. And of course, when Spain has one of its normal traumas, like it would do, and you have a very sort of boring king, this is the way that you will finally politically expel those who you don't want, the others, from your. And I study one of my things is Crusader states and the folk and all that lot. And there is no sort of better way to carry out a pogrom or an expulsion or anything like that, but to go to the areas that are different because they are not Christian, be they might be really, even if you could convert it to Christianity, you ain't safe. And so, this sort of thing gives sort of paranoid kings, leaders, emperors, the perfect excuse to expel, massacre, pogrom, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, well, so let's start with 1492. There's, not only did Columbus sail the ocean blue, that's also when Spain kicked Jews out. 1498, it's Portugal, but so there's a story of the pig here too, right? Because that's also when many Jews start using pig to conceal. Many leave. Columbus has some problems leaving because of the ports being full of Jews leaving. There's also another pig story that I don't get into in that, but Columbus, when he sailed Ocean Blue in 1492, he brought some pigs with him for food and things, and some of them came to He brought them to the quote unquote New World, and then they escaped, and that led to all sorts of deforestation and other problems. And there are wild pigs today that you can trace their lineage to, having been on those ships. So there's a pig history there, even beyond talking about just Jews and pig. But yeah, there's all sorts of fascinating stories with that, with the ways that Jews deal with. So just like, or I use this as a metaphor to say, just like he brought those pigs with him and then they escaped, and it kind of, you have this too with, as Jews fleeing, right? So they leave Spain, where they end up, so one place they end up is Amsterdam, right? Dutch, they don't necessarily have love for Jews, but it's a corporate state, right? So the Dutch East India Trading Company understands that there are Jews who, because of their peripatetic nature, have contacts, business contacts. And so, for example, the Dutch take over Brazil. They send Jews there. Portugal takes it back over and kicks them out. So some of those Jews become the first Jews who go to what is now the United States of America. They go to New York. Peter Stuyvesant, big anti-Semite, he writes back to the company and says, I want these Jews out of here. And the company says, that's adorable, but you're a company employee. Their company employees in good standing. Good luck. They will be there.
Yeah. And
so the first Jews in the United States come from Jews who fled Spain, go to Holland, to Amsterdam, become part of the Dutch East India Trading Company, go down to Brazil, get kicked out of Brazil a couple of years later, then come back, and then come to New York.
Wow.
All because of this. And so again, I can weave pigs in and out of these stories. And so it becomes an interesting way to do that. And the other thing I'll say that when I was writing the conclusion, I decided it was finally time to tackle something that I usually hate. I hate when people try and say, this is a unique story. Because I think so many stories you could tell them in a different way. Like, I'm interested in this angle, you're interested in that angle. We could all tell the story. But what I firmly believe, and maybe it's self-delusion, that if I was to write a book about, Jews and the camel, or Jews and any other animal, I couldn't force it in to a quarter of the places that Jews and the pig just naturally were. So the idea that I could keep weaving it in and out was particular to the pig, because the pig became the mechanism to talk about so many varied experiences of Jews and Jewish identity.
And the thing is, even today, but we look at the world, unfortunately, with broad brushstrokes. We don't look at the nuances, even more so now. You have to click on your social media. And if you were to say to people, what as a non-Jew, they don't eat pigs. They're terrified of pigs. I mean, that is a base level thing, and you just think on such a guttural level. I mean, in Spain they say everything in the Spanish, when we're coming into Matanza season, where they slaughter the pigs, they eat everything but the squeak, I think, or the squeal. But it is that sort of thing that it's become in the worst possible way. It's become an identifying sort of trope, hasn't it?
Yeah, and there's also becomes the fetishizing of the Jew eating the pig, right? And so here, the way I often talk about it is when I'm going to give a talk, the people often say, like, one of the questions that often gets asked to me is, "Oh, do you eat pig?" And what I found, what I very quickly realized is I don't actually want to answer that, because people want to use that to then decide who I am. They want to make a decision. And I found, and so instead I said, why do you need to, what is behind that? And to talk about the history of and instead what it says, I want to talk about all the ways that Jews have interacted with the pig. To the point of making, fake bacon. To the point, and is that kosher? Is it not? There's a long, complicated history of that. What does it mean for Jews to not eat pig? What does it mean to Jews to eat pig? Why does it matter? And what does it mean for a Christian to eat pig or not eat pig? And what does it mean to wonder about why that? Why is that a subject of fascination if someone does or doesn't? And how does that change
Because that links into, and this is going back to my Medieval history, that links into, and I bring this up all the time when people go, oh, well, it's the Jewish problem. And I go, no. This goes back to a deep thing in Central Europe. And you can, my other side hustle is the Nazis, and hey, what are you going to do? But they don't just suddenly decide this and the people go, oh, yeah, okay, we don't like it. This is hot-wired into the Christian or Middle European DNA, because they are different, they are successful, they are hardworking, the money... It is basically like the 14-year-old kids in the bedroom who can't get a girlfriend. They don't know why they aren't getting a girlfriend, but they think, well, it must be somebody else's fault, and therefore, and that is why that people get hung up on this literally this kind. It's important, but it shouldn't be the defining. It's like an alcoholic. Why don't you drink? I don't drink because I'll fall over and die, and that doesn't define your entire human being personality. Right.
Yeah, and so the other thing is to see the long history of things and how they build over time, and how ways that people. So oftentimes when a pig comes up and related to Jews, someone will ask me, like, is this anti-Semitic or is this not? And I sort of work them through the test and see, like, usually, it's pretty obvious to see where it skews one way or the other. And you find this in soccer chants. I found this in Europe in soccer chants. There was a debate in Italy, right? There's AS Roma versus Lazio, and there was recently there was a back and forth, and Roma fans were saying that Lazio, they won't eat pig. Clearly and the joke was clearly about Jews, because they would then put underneath it a swastika. And you can easily find, I'm going to talk about it in the book, so I should plug the book, but you can Google it and find. And there's also anti-Muslim hatred attached to it. There's anti-Muslim hatred with sometimes a little smear of anti-Semitism for fun, and sometimes it's anti-Semitism with a little smear of extra anti-Islamophobia or Islamophobia for fun. This case, it was anti-Semitism, and one of the ways you can tell is the response was Lazio fans responded by making posters and T-shirts and things with Anne Frank with a Roma T-shirt on, right? It's jersey on. And so using pig and Jews and anti-Semitism to mock your opposing soccer team. And yes, I say that's anti-Semitism, right? But it's showing the line is Lazio fans don't eat pig, which then makes them Jews, which is bad, and you should feel bad about it, right? And the thing I say about that is, well, I have 2,000 years of history behind that, right? Yeah. There's, the person who spray painted that on the wall, in Rome, doesn't know the 2,000 years of history, but has been acculturated it.
And British listeners will know this, because this is Tottenham Hotspur, Spurs. They are seen as the North London team that is favoured by the Jewish population. And I'm not going to even repeat what comes out of the terraces. But
look at you want to go to England, at Miliband, there was a controversy of him eating a sandwich. He's a Jew who is eating a sandwich. And he ends up on the cover, and they're making little anti-Semitic jibes about him. And what's behind it is, look, this Jew is going to mess with our economy, and look, he's eating a pig sandwich, right? You can, I was actually, sorry to say this to English listeners, but there was a surprising amount of anti-Semitic pig. I mean, you go back to the Jews bill, where for less than a year, Jews were allowed to be naturalized citizens of England. And there was all this mockery of Jews that were pig related. There's a long history of, again, using that symbolism. But what's behind all of that, right, is fear of the other taking over. It's people in power using Jews because they want people looking at the other rather than them, right? Look, it's not. I try to avoid talking about modern politics, modern time things.
Yeah,
but I can talk
there's
about
a but coming here. I can hear this.
That seem very similar.
Yeah.
But the historian will say, look, that you can tell it's very clearly people with a lot of power and money wanting to act like a magician. Say, look over here at my right hand, ignore my left hand. So my left hand is taking money from your economy, but let's blame someone else. And that someone else, sadly, is often the Jews. And the pig is often the way for me to have you look at my right hand to avoid seeing what my left hand is doing.
Second World War. This is interesting because obviously America. It's a new. You've had the New Deal with Roosevelt. You know, this is a global conflict. Yes. America is bright, thrusting. It gets into the war, and then there is in the 30s, the year preceding, there is this drain of wonderful talent from Austria, from Germany, etc. As they get out of there, But for those Jewish American, people, and again, this is the thing: Jewish, I'm not American. Why?
Yes.
But exactly, yeah. But eating spam for Uncle Sam. What's going on here?
So I have a whole section on in my America chapter on Jews in the military, and it's an interesting thing because and particularly Jews in the American military, because I can go back to civil revolutionary wars period and find Jews who were trying to struggle that because they want to show they're American, but struggle with, do they eat ham or not? Now, there's a long history that actually starts Jews in European armies. There was a long-standing Jewish allowance that if you're fighting for your country and you have no other option, it's better to eat the pig and live. And so therefore, in that sense, there's an allowance. Because when they say, like, look, you're out in the battlefront, it's not like you can just say, okay, time out war. I need to run to the store. I need to go a little farther because I need to get the kosher store. And then I'll come back and we will fight again. Okay, cool. So that doesn't exist. So they said, like, if you're in those moments, you can. Jews, because of the identity aspect, some Jews were more or less comfortable with it. Now, World War II raised it more because, number one, there were so many more Jews who were volunteering. So many more Jews had come to America. So many Jews were volunteering. And it also was seen as particularly, you're fighting the Nazis. You're fighting for the preservation of Jewish life. It was even more. And so you had a larger, more diverse group of people growing up. And then there were a lot of people who were struggling. Will I eat ham for Uncle Sam? Or will I not? And you had many who had to make that decision. Some ate ham before, so they didn't care. Some did for that brief period. Some did not. Some tried it, but then didn't, or went back and forth. My own grandfather served in World War II and did not eat ham for Uncle Sam. But, went hungry when he had to and ate when he could. But I do know he compromised some of the ways he would normally eat because, he's in the Battle of the Bulge. He can't. So you might have to eat a regular ration rather than a kosher ration.
And the other thing, of course, is that let's not beat around the bush here. The American military, which goes from being a very small situation in the 30s to a huge global fight, fighting everywhere from Italy to Normandy to the Pacific. Yeah. But it is, civil war notwithstanding, it isn't the most progressive regime. And if you are in those, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, in Alabama, Tennessee, there are. I mean, we talk about African American situations in this, but also seen as not really American.
Yeah, exactly. And that for many African Americans, for many Jews, that was the way of trying to prove it, right? Like, you go off to war and you're trying to show that and for many Americans, that's the first time they met Jews. That's the first time for many white Americans. That's the first time they met an African American. And sometimes that exploded stereotypes, right? Like, how can I judge that African-American, a Jew who just took a bullet for me, or who just saved my, or just saved my life, or who fought as violently as I did. For some, their prejudice held out, and for others, right, maybe they met a jerk and they felt that confirmed, right? But you can, regardless of your race or religion or ethnicity, you can be nice or a jerk, right? And people can expand that out. In America, the thing at least the Nazis had for a while, it made it harder to be overtly anti-Semitic, right? Because in
the run up to war, yeah. I mean, in the run up to war.
But right, it was a little harder because it was not popular to be pro-Nazi post 1942 or 43 in America, right? And overtly anti. And as the reality of the Holocaust sunk in, right, it became harder to be overtly. So, yeah.
But here we are, 80 years later, because we're coming up next year to the 80th anniversary and that generation are no longer with us. A lot of them, they're very old men, very old women. And it is and I know we're not going to take current situation, Jordan.
I will if I need.
But
I can do it. If
again, I mean, we have seen in the UK riots saying these are immigrants, they're not British. Prove you're British by drinking 18 pints of beer and getting a tattoo. And in, this whole thing about what it means to be American. And we are back to those tropes, right? You're listening to, Kid Rock with your truck, with your six-pack and your gun and a baseball cap. And so therefore, and on certain populists, they are failing that, that great American nationality test, which is madness and mayhem.
I agree. So this is the I always say I want more people to study history, right? Because history makes it harder to just to state a bumper sticker statement. So let's go to England for a second, right? Like you want to say, what's British? What's more British? I'm a food guy, right? That's what I study. What's more British than fish and chips? Well, then you'd have to learn that fish and chips, actually, you have to thank Sephardic Jews for fish and chips, because the people who started selling fish and chips together were Sephardic Jews, and then it caught on, and it was a cheap food, and then very quickly becomes identified with British working class, and then it kind of gets reinvented. But the origin of fish and chips, you study any history of fish and chips, has to do with Sephardic Jews. They did not invent fried fish, fried chips, but they were the ones who started selling it together in England. And so, but if you go up to someone who's spouting anti-immigration things today in England and you say, what's more British than fish and chips? And say, yeah, and say, great, so let's thank the immigrant Jews for that. That wouldn't go over well, right? But what I would want people to say is like, well, things are more complicated, right? Let's look at, but that's not easy, right? It's easier to blame. And yes, what you see in this history is Jews have been easy to blame. And I see these stereotypes. I will say here, one of the hardest moments of me writing this book was when I was in medieval and early modern chapters, and it's just anti-Semitic incident after incident. And I hit a point where I found this German cartoon that I decided not to reproduce the picture of, but I do reference in the book, and I've talked more about it afterwards, but I didn't want to talk about it too much in the book, is blaming Jews for vaccines and saying vaccines are a Jewish conspiracy against. You shouldn't trust vaccines. And I'm researching, writing this in the middle of the teeth of the pandemic and the vaccine debate, when if you went online, it'd be easy to find anti-Semitic claims. The Jews they're trying to manipulate this. They just want to make money off their stocks for the pharmaceutical company. And I'm sitting there like, this is 200 years earlier. And by the way, that cartoon has a pig in it. So and the mocking Jews and pigs and vaccines, and it was just, I literally had to stop my research. I'm like, I need to be done for the day. I can't. Yeah. Right. So that's why I also wrote, but this book is very, very important to me because it's something I've been working on for 20 years, but also I can see that this is just going to keep going, that the pig will continue to be embodied with that. And it's not always a good thing, but I'm hoping to call attention to it so people can see that and they can maybe take a moment instead of just accepting it. Here, I will talk about something very recent. I've seen some of the current debates about what's going on Israel-Palestine. And people can have whatever opinions they want about it, but I've seen at various protesting sites in various ways, pigs being used. People will write in comments, this is a pig-free zone. And I find that ironic because of how it's being used, or people have used it in ways that are mocking Jews via pig and conflating Israel and Jews, and in complex ways that I see as deeply problematic, right? But here it is playing out before my eyes. And what I had to say to, this is the first time I'm saying in public, but I said privately to some friends, is it's really hard to see your theories that from history continuing to be relevant. And everything that I've seen so far fits into patterns that I've long documented, right? And it's very hard to see it playing out again. And so I'm hoping that regardless of where people fall in the spectrum of political ideology, before they bring the pig into anything, they take a moment to think about what it means, positive or negative.
The book is called Forbidden. It's by Jordan Rosenblum, we're speaking to you today. If people want to find you online, where's the best place to find you?
The main social media I have right now is Blue Sky, Professor Rosenblum, and also you can find my email address at wis.edu, and I'm always happy to interact with people who like to read about pigs.
And you can order the book from our virtual bookstore. It's been an absolute eye-opener. Jordan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.